pickaxes coming towards us, and it records how deep they were under the ground. And we always wondered, why in the world would they record that? Who cares how deep they are? Now we think we know that the way they did it, you say they used laser technology. What are you kidding? 700 BC. They used radar. No, they didn't. They used sonar imaging. No, they didn't. What they did is on top of the rock, they put a chalk line. And then they would get on top of the rock with a little hammer, they would beat out the chalk line. And if you were down digging, you identified exactly where the tapping is, and then you dug and followed the tapping as they led you from both sides toward each other. Brilliant. But it makes sense that this would mention how deep they were, right? Because if you were too deep, what? You couldn't hear the tapping. Oh, brilliant. See, y'all are brilliant. Good for you. Now, if you notice the writing on here, it doesn't look like modern Hebrew at all. Modern Hebrew, let's see if I can, we'll look over there at that sign where it says destruction. Look above it. See, modern Hebrew is very squared up in how its script is. If you can see this script, it isn't. This is important. Hebrew never changed. The Hebrew language was the Hebrew language and it never changed. However, in 586 BC, when the Jews went to Babylon, the way they wrote Hebrew changed. And we can identify with this. You know the Declaration of Independence? In Congress, and you know they got that big, huge S for a final S, right? You know what I'm talking about? Well, we don't write the S's like that anymore. We still spell Congress with two S's, but we don't use that form of the second S. Got it? So, we changed the way we wrote English, but we didn't change English. Well, they changed the way they wrote Hebrew on a much more expansive scale, but they didn't change Hebrew. And the reason they changed is because these letters were very difficult to write and took much more time than those simple square letters up there. And when they were carried off to Babylon, the Babylonians spoke Aramaic, which is a sister language to Hebrew, has the exact same alphabet, and the Babylonians had simplified the way they wrote it, and the Hebrews, the Jews looked at them and went, whoa, it's a whole lot easier than writing it this way, and they switched the way they wrote it. Important because if you dig up something out of the ground and it's written in square script, you know it was written after what? 586 BC. And if you dig something up that's written in the Paleo, older script, you know it was written before 586. So you automatically, from the minute you look at it, already you can begin to classify where it came from by the shape of the letters. You with me? And this is one of the ways, because the letters change shape more incrementally, not as radically, also down through the centuries. This is one of the ways that people date inscriptions, is by the orthography, meaning the way the letters are written. Here we go. What we have here, come on over, are two silver amulets. Come on over, folks. What is an amulet? They're made out of pure silver. An amulet is an inscription written on, in this case, silver, and they would roll it up and put a piece of rawhide through the middle and wear it as a charm. On their wrist, around their neck, was basically a charm. And written, when these were found, they were found by accident, as most of the greatest archaeological discoveries in Israel are. There was a backhoe, they were building a new building, they accidentally broke into a tomb at a place called Chetef-Kindom. In this tomb was all kinds of stuff, including these two amulets. And when they unrolled them, the lettering was clear as a bell. Years ago when I was here, you could see every letter on these. Now, what does silver do? Tarnishes, even when it's kept in climate control. So now you can't, for all practical purposes, I don't think you can see any of the letters anymore. But here they are, written on the paper behind it. And when you look at those, you see the old script versus the new script. You see the difference? Yes, class? Yes. Okay. So, immediately, the minute we open these, what do we know about this inscription? Written before 586 BC. You know that the minute you look at them, right? These actually come from around 650 BC, and they are, what's written on the amulet is the high priestly prayer. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. You know, from Numbers chapter 6. And this is what some little girl had inscribed on this amulet, and she wore it like a, you know, like a charm. Okay. Now, why is this important for biblical studies? Well, first of all, this is the oldest inscription of a Bible verse in the world. Up until this, Jeremiah, 250 BC, Dead Sea Scrolls was the oldest Bible verses we had. Here we jump 400 years to 650 BC. And it's also very important because many liberal scholars will say Moses did not write the Pentateuch. It was a compilation of 4 documents: J, the Jehovah document; E, the Elohim, meaning God, document; P, the priestly regulations; and D, the book of Deuteronomy, J-E-P-D. And some guy around 400 BC, give or take, not Moses, collated these all together, stuck Moses' name on it to give it authority, and that's where the Pentateuch comes from. Now, the P document that the liberal scholars believe is in here is usually dated to the 500s BC. That's a problem, because we just found a verse from the P document that's 100 years before it was written. That's a problem, right? Well, you would think that liberal scholars would have gone, oh my gosh, maybe we need to rethink this whole JEPD thing. No, of course not. All they did is say, gee, the P document must be a lot older than we thought. And they redated it. Because they're not, listen, if you don't want to believe, I don't care what they dig out of the ground, you're not going to believe. However, this is very important for us as Bible believers because it tells us this nonsense about the book, the first 5 books of the Bible being written and composed and, fraudulently. There's no sense to that. Because you don't put something on an amulet that was written a week ago. I mean, you put something on an amulet that was written 200 years ago, 400 years ago. It's part of society. It's part of the ethos of Jewish culture. That's what you put on a charm, right? So even though these are from 650, these verses have to be much, much older to have gained that kind of notoriety in society that you put them on a charm. You with me? Mm-hmm. So does this prove Moses wrote the Pentateuch? No. Does it certainly imply that the Pentateuch is a whole lot older than the liberals are willing to admit, and Moses sure could have written it? Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, here we go. Almost done. Told you. You all get the complete board? No. All right, folks, come on over here. I'm going to make archaeologists out of you yet. Come on over so everybody can see this screen. Come on over. This screen is one of the most frustrating parts of the museum because every time I'm ready to make a point, it changes. See? Come on over. But you know what? I'm smarter than this screen. So we will make it work. Okay. Here we see the modern Hebrew alphabet. Very squared off. You see the squared off script like this? Very, very box-like. Are you with me? In case you didn't recognize it, this is the English alphabet. Ha ha. I thought that was pretty funny, but anyway. Okay. And here are the old Paleo letters that you saw just a moment ago, both on the amulet and on the Siloam inscription. So, the way writing began was pictographic, meaning you drew a picture of what the word meant. and every word, every picture meant a whole thing. For example, well, this I don't like this. It'll come around in a minute. But for example, bayit, in Hebrew means a house. And so, by the way, here's the Siloam inscription that you guys just saw. See the old writing? You follow me? Doesn't look anything like this, right? Okay. Ayin, a letter in the Hebrew alphabet, means an eye. And so when you wrote ayin, if you wanted dog means a fish. So if you wanted to say the eye of the fish, you would write the ayin symbol, meaning eye, and then you'd write the dagesh symbol, meaning fish. And each of those two symbols meant a whole word. Somebody came up with the brilliant idea to invent the alphabet by saying, wait a minute, let's not make the letter here, the picture. Let's not make the picture mean the whole word. Let's just make the picture mean the first sound of the word. So, bayit means a house. So instead of having the sign for bayit mean a house, we'll just have it mean dagesh means a fish. So instead of having the picture of a fish, dagesh meaning a fish, it'll mean the sound D. And so if I want to spell fish, I'll put a D sound and a G sound, and I'll get dog. Are you with me? Somebody, yeah? Hello? Yeah. So they came up with this period. Now here you really see it. Aleph means a cow, right? Bayit means a house. Dagesh means what? A fish. All right? Let's go over here. Nachash means what? Snake. Ayin means an eye. Do you see how these pictures represent the whole word? Fish. But instead, somebody figured out, let's just take their sounds and we'll spell words. And that's a lot simpler. Otherwise, you got to memorize thousands of pictures, a la the Chinese alphabet. Now you only got to memorize 26 letters, and we got it. And then it went let's just take house, bayit, went from looking like a house. Over time, it developed into the modern, well, this is actually the Dead Sea Scroll, but see how they squared it off? Look at the difference between, see, I told you. But do you see how they squared it off? Yeah, and made it easier, and that's how the alphabet developed. The Phoenicians developed the alphabet in the 10th century. They came up with it being alphabetic. You with me? Yeah. But it was around even before that. The earliest alphabetic writing we find is back to 1500 BC. So people often say Moses couldn't have written the Pentateuch. People couldn't write in 1500 BC. Oh, sorry. Yes, they could. Now, this is Nachash for a snake. Now, why does Hebrew go from the right to the left? And Akkadian, and Aramaic, and these early languages. Why? Well, because they were chiseled into stone. They weren't written on paper. The early writing was chiseled into stone, as you can see. So if you got a chisel in your left hand and the hammer in your right hand, and you're trying to go this way, chiseling, that's a problem. Why? I can't see what I'm chiseling. My hand's in the way. So if I go this way, however, what? I can see what I'm chiseling. Great. However, once I start writing it, I don't want to write it this way because what? You can't see it. My hand's in the way. I want to write it, if I'm right-handed, and sorry about you left-handers, but the world wasn't made for you. If you're right-handed, then you writing it this way, what? You can see what you're writing. Do you understand? The Phoenicians were the ones who changed this from right to left to left to right. Makes sense. All right, lots of things make sense if you just know why. Okay, come on. Okay, this is the last thing. Come on over. Yes. Yes. Okay. This is the end of our course. We're going to have a test in just a moment, and if you pass it, we're going to give you a button that you're an amateur archaeologist. Come on over. Come Come on all the way over so everybody can see. Let's go, let's go. Machen Sie schnell. Okay, come on in, guys. All right, so here we go. This is the Pontius Pilate stone, the original, not the facsimile that you saw in Caesarea. This is the original. And you see the name Pilate, P-I-L-A-T-U-S. You see it? Yes? Yes. And the last two letters of Pontius, right here, U-S, Pontius Pilatus. Now, we mentioned this earlier, but just to review, people had never found the name of Pontius Pilate anywhere outside of the Bible on any Roman inscription until 1963, when this was discovered at Caesarea, and therefore liberal scholars said Pontius Pilate didn't exist. Now, the Bible made him up. We've never found any record of him anywhere. Well, guess what? The more they dig out of the Bible, the more the Bible proves to be right. Good for you. Okay. You can actually come up here and touch it if the guard's not watching. Now, behind you, right there, is an ossuary. An ossuary is a bone box. What they would do in ancient Israel is they would bury you in the ground, give the worms a couple of years to eat everything off of you, and then they'd dig you up. And they would take your bones, and they would put it in a box like this, and then they would stack these boxes, you know, in tombs, and then that meant they could recirculate the ground and put somebody else in it. It's a real green thing. You understand what I'm saying? And so we found this one by mistake, again, at a construction site when they were digging into, you know, with a backhoe, and they found a whole group of these, and they were very highly decorated, as you can see. See that bone box compared to some of these over here? So we figured somebody really important was buried in this thing, and on the side of the bone box we found the name Caiaphas. Nobody, and we know it's from the time of Christ, nobody anymore disagrees that these are the bones of Caiaphas, the high priest, whom the Bible says condemned Jesus to the cross. And I love it. Doesn't God have a sense of humor? Jesus rose from the dead, and we got the bones of the guy who sent him there. Isn't that cool? Now, there's no bones in there now. Don't open. There's no bones in there now. They're out. But when we found it, it was full of his skull and all of his bones. I love that. Okay. Finally, this is the ankle of a crucified, I presume, man from the time of Christ. And you can see the nail still in his ankle going from side to side. As a matter of fact, if you look on the right side, you'll see that the nail is bent. So apparently, but when they went to drive it into the wood, they bent the nail. That's the story of my life when it comes to carpentry. Okay, that always happens to me. Anyway, the point is that this shows us that at the time of Christ, they were not crucifying people with their legs crossed like this. They were crucifying people with their legs on either side of the cross, just the way this little diagram, when you come up and look, shows. So I know many of you have crucifixes, and I know that they mean a lot to you, but I just want to tell you, in your mind, just that is not the way Jesus' feet were. They were on the sides of the cross. Because there's no way, if your feet are like this, that you can drive a nail through both feet and not break a bone. And yet, not a bone in him was broken, the Bible says, to fulfill the Old Testament prophecy. If the feet are on the side, you can drive a nail through your Achilles tendon easily and not break a bone. You with me? Yeah. So that doesn't mean that's not the reason why we believe his feet were on the side. The reason we believe his feet is on the side is we've got proof that this is how the Romans did it. But the wonderful thing is, it confirms that prophecy in the Bible. You with me? Now, one last thing, if you look behind you here, you'll see the wonderful head and bust of Hadrian, Emperor Hadrian. That was found at Bethshan, where you guys were. Remember you at Bethshan? Yeah, that was dug up at Bethshan. He was the emperor, 135 AD, that spread salt all over the city of Jerusalem so nothing would grow, kicked all the Jews out, made it a capital offense for a Jew to be found in the city walls of Jerusalem. Wonderful man, Hadrian. And of course,